Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it was sent to me by our admin. So this is the translation of that message that was sent to me. The message reads like this. Hello, Brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post my own story as hidden identity? My father has since passed away, but my father passed away. This was after he had gotten out of jail because of the lawyers that we were using at that time. They were really good. So my father had been taken to prison because he had murdered this other guy who was a Zimbabwean national. So at that time, my father, he was the one who was leading this other community project where people were busy farming your vegetables, and then people will be selling those vegetables to your shops like ShopRite as well as Spar and other supermarkets. So my father was the head of that community project. So my father then came with an idea because he said that the cost like that they were looking at, everything was really expensive, and the guys that were working on that small plot, the guys, they wanted a lot of money, so they were always running at a loss. My father then said, how about we just find someone who is from Zim? Already my father's brother, our uncle, he had this other man who was from Zim who used to take care of his cattle. So my father then spoke with that man from Zim, and my father went and picked him up, and they brought him, and he started working at that plot. So whilst he was working at that plot, the things that we were told by the first Sangoma, where we went to consult because of the things that were happening, we were told that my father then consulted with this other healer who is from Mozambique, and my father then went to Mozambique. When my father went to Mozambique, he wanted to get these charms that were going to make him to be very rich. And the other thing was that it was said that my father was in love with this other woman. So the woman did not love my father. So my father, him being someone who loved using a lot of charms, whilst he was doing those rituals, he then told that traditional healer from Mozambique that he wanted some lucky charm. A lucky charm, when he will be speaking with a woman, the woman will just say, yes, I love you too. So my father was then given some oil that he was supposed to use. So this oil, he was told that the oil was not supposed to be touched by my mother, no matter what. That small bottle that he was given that was full of oil, that had a little horn that was inside, no matter what, my father was told that my mother was never supposed to touch that little bottle, and worst of all, she was never supposed to touch it when she was on her period. My father returned back, and when my father returned back, he started making money. He started getting a lot of contracts, and how he started getting those contracts with Eskom, we don't even know. My father bought his first truck, the second truck, until he had 10 trucks, and all of a sudden we were like rich, and we moved out of the area where we were staying because we were staying in the So we moved out of the village, and we came and we started staying in the city, and we are still staying at that house that was bought by my father when he was still alive. And at that time, when my father bought this house, it was worth 4.5 million rands, and we are still staying at that house even right now, even though there are a lot of spiritual encounters that happen at our house. So at that time, we did not know anything. We just thought that this was by the grace of God. And this has made me even to hate Christianity, because my father started going to this other church, and automatically we were also going to that church. The pastor, even though people were saying that he was a powerful pastor who was not a South African pastor, this man, he was receiving a lot of donations from my father. Yet my father, he was a ritualist. He was using that lucky charm so that his trucks will never be involved in accidents, and he can keep on getting those contracts. So he had forgotten almost about that little community project. To him, that was just worthless because he was making a lot of money. It then happened that my mother then came across that small bottle that had the oil, and my mother confirmed this when we were consulting with that Sangoma. And it then happened that my mother, one day when she was busy in her bedroom, she then came across that lucky charm bottle that had the oil and the little horn. And my mother, when the Sangoma said this, she said, yes, that is what happened. My mother said that at that time she was suspecting that my father was cheating on her, and she kept on snooping around until she saw that there were some charms that were hidden in her wardrobe. She then took those charms without asking our father. She then burned everything. After she had burned everything, she thought that by her praying, then those charms, they were not going to work. Then the spiritual encounters started. We used to hear like people that will be throwing rocks on top of our roof, and my father, he stopped coming home. And at that time we were suffering. My father had refused to take care of us. Sometimes we will go to bed hungry. We'll just only eat pap and acha. That was all that we could afford. We would pay like all the bills, the electrical bills, the water bills, but as for taking care of us, he did not want to do that. We even reached a point where we could not even go to school at all, because we were no longer going to the government school, but we were now going to a private school. So when things were really hard, that was when we heard that that other guy who was working at that plot where they were doing the community project, the guy was just found dead. And when this guy was found dead, he had some of his body parts that were missing, like his manhood was missing, as well as his testicles and his tongue and his eyes. They were also missing. At that time we just thought that maybe it is just a ritual murder. But what had happened was that my father, after my mother had burnt his charms, then these charms, they started fighting against my father, because that lucky charm bottle, it transformed itself and it became a snake, a black mamba. So it was now fighting against my father. That is why my father had ran away from the place where we were staying in the city and returned back to the village. And he was saying that my mother, she was a witch. Since my father was making a lot of money, all of his relatives, they were on his side, and they said that my mother is a witch, umtakat. And my father had returned back to Mozambique, to that traditional healer, where he was told that in order to fix the whole mess that he had created, the blood of a stranger was needed. So the easy target was that guy that was from Zim. After my father had sacrificed that man, life returned back to normal. My father came and apologized to my mother and even bought my mother a car. And we thought that finally we were going to become a happy family. At that time, I never believed that there is something like witchcraft. When my father returned back to our family house, I can say that life was normal. This was for almost a year and a half. That was when we started to see the ghost of that man who was from Zim, who had been murdered by my father. The first time that we saw him, it was my little brother who had seen him. Since he was now being naughty, there were times when he would steal the car, then he will go to his girlfriend's place. So he used to come back like really late at night. On that day, when he saw this man, it was somewhere around 10 p.m. That was when we heard him screaming. He had just opened the gate. So when he opened the gate, that was when he saw a man that was standing in the driveway. This man, when he saw the man, he thought that maybe it was an armed robber. But what happened next, it really scared him, and he started screaming. And he said that the man transformed himself, and he just saw a fire that was burning in the middle of the driveway. Then this fire exploded, and then he started screaming. So when we went outside, we did not see anything. We went outside and we took him indoors, and my father, I saw him, he was shaking. Even the time when he went to hang the keys, because we used to keep all the car keys just behind the kitchen door. When he went to hang them, my brother, my father, I saw that his hands, they were shaking and he was panicking. He went straight to his bedroom and he came back and he said that from now on, I do not want to see anyone going outside at night. So whenever the sun would have gone down, everyone was supposed to be indoors. My father then started bringing a lot of prophets from Zim. My father, he was now like someone who was mentally ill, because he will just be driving around, like those people from Zim, they have their churches everywhere in the bushes. My father will be driving up and down, picking the prophets and bringing them to our family house. They used to pray. Some of them, they would come, especially on Friday. Then they will start to sing and pray from Friday until Sunday. They will be singing and praying, trying to chase away that spirit that was coming to our house. Then the day that I saw this man, I was busy in the bathroom just playing around with my makeup. I only blinked once. When I looked into the mirror, I did not see myself, but I saw the face of that man, the man who had been murdered by my father. When I saw that spirit looking at me in the mirror, that was when I panicked. I screamed and I fell to the ground. Then I collapsed. When I collapsed, Brother Nashi, I saw a man that was holding his manhood and his testicles, and he said, "This is what your father did. Look at me." I tried looking at that man, but this man, he was scary because he did not have his eyes. His mouth was wide open, and he said that this is how I died. Your father sacrificed me, and I just fainted. When I woke up, I found myself, I was at this other location, and I was inside this small mukuku where there was this other prophetess from Zim and another prophet from Zim who were both praying for me. They prayed and they prayed and they prayed. The more that they were praying, that was when I found myself understanding Shona for the first time. Everything that they were telling me, I was understanding. Then I started to speak. But before I had started speaking, I felt like there was this other spiritual force that was forcing itself into my body. I resisted and I tried resisting, but I felt like there was something that just entered into my body, and I felt like I had been hit by electricity. Then I started speaking. At that time, I did not even know what was happening to me. I was just in a dark place, a very cold, dark place, and I was speaking. When I woke up, then my mother was crying, and that was when I was told that I had been possessed by the spirit of that man who had been murdered by my father. So this spirit had said that it was going to fight against my father. That was when my mother knew that this is what had happened. My father paid a lot of money to those prophets because he was trying to kill that spirit. But each and every time when they will do some prayers, it was said that the spirit will start to speak through me, and it will say that this one, the one that I am possessing, I can kill her right now so that you can know that what you did to me, it was painful. And my father kept on giving those prophets the money until my father was arrested. Even the day that my father was arrested, I just fell down, and they said that I started laughing, and I was speaking in Shona saying that today you are going to get arrested, old man. He got arrested, but because of the lawyers, my father was then released from prison. When my father was released from prison, this is what we did. We had to travel to Zim. My brother, I had never thought that one day I'll be traveling to Zim. After we had gotten our passports, my father had spoken with the relative of the man whom he had murdered, but they were speaking like in secret. This was just a deal that was between them. And my father said that he had offered this man 300k. This 300k, this is how we carried it. Those two prophets, they were the ones that were speaking with that relative of that man that my father had murdered. So these two prophets, they were the ones who told my father that there was a way that will be able to smuggle the money into Zim. So they had spoken with this other bus, so they just pretended as if they were returning back to their country. But my mother was traveling with that bus. Even my mother's passport, we don't even know how it got stamped. My father and I and my siblings, we were traveling in our car, but we were following behind that bus until we were crossed over into Zim. That was when those prophets came and they started traveling with us, including my mother. So that other woman had a small child. So what they did is that in that same bag that she had the pampers and some of the child's foodstuffs, that is where they had placed some of the money The other prophet had the money, as well as my mother. My mother was traveling in that bus. She said she was really shaking when we were on the border, when they were busy searching the bus, but they did not find anything. Then she got smuggled into Zim, and we traveled until we had reached the prophet's village, because that is where we were supposed to do everything. And we waited for that relative, and he came, but on the third day, he rested a little while. Then we started doing the ritual. So whilst we were doing the ritual, my brother, the things that they did to me, even right now, I am still suffering because of that. So we then traveled to that relative's village where the man who had been murdered by my father is buried. On the way, my mother and that other prophetess, they had gone to this other shop, and they had bought like this very cheap wedding dress. What it was for, I did not even understand at that time. I got to know what was the purpose of that wedding dress when we finally arrived at that village. Late at night, that was when we were told that traditional beer was needed, but there was no time to brew that traditional healer. So they bought this other traditional beer that is called chibuku that they sell there, and we had 6 of those chibuku bottles, and we then went to that man's grave who had been murdered by my father. When we were there, that was when I was told that I was supposed to wear that wedding dress. So I wore that wedding dress, and I was told to go and stand on top of that grave. The prophet and the prophetess then opened those bottles of chibuku and made me to drink. It was really sour. It was not nice to taste. Then they started to pour that beer on my body. They poured until all the beer was finished. Then they said that it is done. We then returned back to South Africa. And what hurts me the most is that at that time when this thing happened, I was really young. I was too young to understand what was going on. So my father used me for this cleansing ceremony, and he married me off to that spirit of that man whom he murdered. When we returned back to South Africa, my father then committed suicide. But it is not known if it was my father who shot himself or if he was shot by someone else. So, dear listeners, right there is a message that was sent to me by one of our admins. Strange things do happen in this world. Yo.